the South, sweet potato pie and I shut my mouth. Gone with the wind, there ain't nobody looking back again.
Hello everybody, this time now for my 2012 college football preview shows. And just like last year, we're going to preview all the major conferences in college football, and then we'll have a best of the rest show at the end of our previews for the conferences, in which we'll talk about Boise State, Notre Dame, plus some other non-BCS teams. But we're going to begin with the SEC West and talking about the SEC in general. Of course, the last 6 seasons, they've been the kings of college football, winning each of the last 6 national championships. And last year it was magnified when it was an all-SEC national championship game when Bama destroyed LSU in New Orleans to win yet another national title, the third for Nick Saban in his great coaching career. Can Alabama repeat as national champions this year? Well, let's see. Even though Bama returns quarterback A.J. McCarron, and even though the running back position shows a lot of promise in Eddie Lacy, who now has to fill in the shoes of Trent Richardson. Remember, Lacy last year averaged 7 yards a carry. And even though the offensive line is a veteran one for Bama, they returned 4 starters. Bama has to replace 12 total starters, okay? If you know anything about football, 22 starters on a team. So when you have to replace 12 because they left early for the NFL or they graduated, yeah, that right there is going to be a tall order even for a team like Bama. It's going to be a new offensive coordinator as well. And hopefully, if you're a Bama fan, this coordinator will help McCarron develop a strong passing game. Passing was not exactly Bama's strong suit last season. The secondary will be strong for the Tide, returning All-American type Robert Lester at safety, and the linebackers are tough for Alabama. But another problem for the Tide, the schedule. They got to open up with Sugar Bowl champion Michigan. That game will be played in Arlington, Texas. Plus, you have to handle the likes of LSU on the road. That's that major game in early November. And plus, you have to play at Missouri and then early on in the year at Arkansas. And you have, of course, have to deal with that rugged competition elsewhere in the SEC. I still think Bama is going to be a 10-win type team. But because they have a lot of starters to replace and because of that tough road slate, I don't think Bama's going to get to the SEC championship game this year. And then we talk about Texas A&M. Welcome to the SEC West, where they're going to find out quickly that life is more difficult than it ever could have been as far as the Big 12 goes, especially facing those SEC defenses. But at least Kevin Sumlin brings optimism to Aggie Land. He replaces Mike Sherman, and a new offensive coordinator is now in College Station as well in Cliff Kingsbury. That's right, Cliff Kingsbury, who was quarterback a few years ago for Texas Tech. And no surprise at all, this offense is going to resemble kind of like Texas Tech, as A&M will be running a spread offense. So expect Jamil Showers, who replaces Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, to throw quite a bit. And they'll have some terrific receivers to throw to in the form of Ryan Swope as well as Uzome Nwachuku. They are both dangerous, especially Swope, but they also have to replace Jeff Fuller, who was a terrific wideout. Christian Michael, everybody's going to be focused on him because of the fact that he had a torn ACL last year. So if he's recovered from that, A&M running behind the tackles of Luke Jokel and Jake Matthews and also providing Showers with pass protection, A&M's offense should do just fine in the SEC. But it's the defense that kind of concerns me because of the fact that even though Sean Porter is a terrific linebacker, the secondary had major issues last year, giving up tons of yardage against Big 12 quarterbacks, and the fact that A&M could not hold on to leads. And all but one of their losses last year, the Aggies had a second-half lead at some point. That team could have easily have gone 10 or 2 or better if they could have just finished games. A&M, I look for them to be about an 8-win team because, again, the SEC is going to be tough. You got to host Florida. You got to host Arkansas. You got to host Missouri, whom the Aggies have struggled against in recent years. And plus, you still have to play Auburn, LSU, and Bama. 8 wins for A&M, I think, is going to be considered an achievement. You look at Arkansas, and things were set up well for them to contend with the upper echelon of the division, and then Bobby Petrino, the terrific coach, ends up making a fool of himself by messing around with the co-ed, wrecking on a motorcycle with that co-ed, and turning his face into hamburger meat, and then essentially getting fired. Now, John L. Smith takes over for Petrino as head coach for the Razorbacks, but at least Smith will have a darn good quarterback, one of the best in the country, in Tyler Wilson. But Razorback fans really are curious as far as if Niall Davis, who missed all of last year with the ankle injury, will look like the Davis of 2010, who is an all-SEC selection. We'll have to wait and see on that. Arkansas also has some shoes to fill, replacing 3 offensive linemen, and they have to replace 3 of their 4 terrific receivers from a year ago, with only Kobe Hamilton returning. Defensively, Alonzo Highsmith looks like a stud for the Razorbacks, but the Razorbacks have to do a better job of defending the run. In their 2 losses last year, which were coincidentally against the national title teams, LSU and Bama, Arkansas was very susceptible against the run, so that must get better. I'll look for the Razorbacks to be a 9-win team, but no more, because they still have to play LSU and Bama, although they get them at home, and they still have to go to A&M, and they still have to go to SEC favorite South Carolina. And plus you have to deal with the coaching change as well. So a 9-win season, I think, is probable for Pig Suey there in Fayetteville. The Auburn Tigers, you have to remember, last year about Auburn, not much was expected from them, because even though they won the national title in 2010, they didn't have Cam Newton or Nick Fairley anymore entering 2011, and they were without a lot of other starters from that national title team as well. Considering all that, 8-5 was not that bad of a year for Gene Chizik's squad. But just like A&M and just like Bama, Auburn will have a new offensive coordinator as well, as his old one is now the head coach at Arkansas State. And guess who went with him? Running back Michael Dyer, although he won't play this year at ASU, has to sit out a year. So Ontario McCaleb now becomes the man in the backfield for the Tigers. So I still think Bama's running game is going to be strong. Defensively, watch this guy for Auburn, Corey Lemonier. I think he'll play in the NFL someday, because he gets off of the line of scrimmage pretty quick. He's pretty tough, Corey Lemonier. But overall, Auburn just doesn't have the widespread experience talent of the upper echelon of the SEC West right now. I think Auburn will probably win 8 games this year, probably finish 3rd or 4th in this division, but they're probably a year or 2 away from getting back to looking like that Auburn team of 2010. Mississippi State, last year one of the big disappointments in college football. They had a 9-win season in 2010, but last year did not get terrific quarterback play from Chris Welf in those money-making games, and as a result, Mississippi State had to beat Wake Forest in their bowl game just to finish with a winning record of 7-6. So now quarterback Tyler Russell, he's going to be the man, and Russell figures to be a better passing prospect than Ruff anyway. He's more of a pro-style passer, and maybe that's what Mississippi State needs. Running back Ladarius Perkins should help as well, and the secondary returns nearly everybody, including cornerback Jonathan Banks. Mississippi State, however, they're not playing in the Mountain West Conference or the WAC. They're playing in the SEC West, where you cannot have any mistakes at all. And just like Auburn, Mississippi State's talent is not going to be able to compete with the big boys. I look for Mississippi State to probably still get to a bowl game, win 6 or 7 games, but don't expect more than that this year. And the Ole Miss Rebels have a new head coach after its old one resigned, pretty much forced to quit. That was Houston Nutt. Now Hugh Freeze takes over, and I think Hugh Freeze's goal should be to unfreeze that winless record that they own in the SEC. Ole Miss, believe it or not, has lost their last 14 conference games in a row. Ouch. And even though Dante Moncrief is a nice wide receiver, and even though Charles Sawyer is a good safety, the talent for Ole Miss just isn't widespread, and they have very little depth, which in the SEC West is a recipe for disaster. Look for Ole Miss to probably win 3 or 4 games overall and finish in the cellar in the West. And that will take us to LSU. Yes, those Tigers, you know they're going to be pretty angry after what happened to them against Bama in the national championship game. But unlike last year, I think they've got a little more stability at quarterback this time. The Bayou Boys will have Zach Mettenberger at quarterback. I've heard a lot of good things about him. And the running game will be solid. In fact, I think this is going to be the cream of the crop for LSU's offense because of the fact that they're good at running back and they've got depth with both Spencer Ware and Michael Ford. So expect LSU's ground game to really get the job done, and that offensive line is one of the best in the country, anchored by Alex Hurst at the tackle. Defensively, don't expect much of a drop-off either for the Tigers, with Sam Montgomery, an All-American type at defensive end, and Eric Reed at safety, and Tyrann Mathieu is one of the better defensive backs in the country, despite the fact that he's not tall, he's under 6 feet, but he's a burner. He can cover ground. He's got good hands, and he's dangerous on special teams. He's also a punt returner. He ran one back for a TD last year in the SEC title game against Georgia. And Brad Wing, might be the best college punter I have seen this generation. That guy is absolute money. Looking at the schedule for LSU, the non-conference slate is not bad at all. Their toughest game, just looking on paper, looks to be that Washington game early on. Washington will be improved, but Washington has to come to LSU, and I don't see Washington pulling off an upset at all. I think LSU should win that game handily. The Tigers get South Carolina at home, which will help, and they get Bama at home in the game of the year, in my opinion, in all of football. That will be in early November, a primetime game against the Tide, and all eyes will be on that game for sure. LSU, though, cannot overlook the likes of Florida, and they also cannot overlook the likes of Arkansas, who they'll play in Fayetteville at the end of the season. But the talent, the coaching, the ingredients are there for LSU to not only win the SEC West, which I think they'll do, but they have the ingredients to go all the way and finish the job this time. Well, that's going to do it for my preview of the SEC West. We'll talk about the SEC East on my next show. So long for now.